Productive Pastor 47, the Sunday Evening Review. What's going on, friends? Productive Pastor back with another episode, starting a 3-episode series about having a weekly review system. This is the first episode about the Sunday evening review, but it could be a Monday morning review, however you want to do that. But I'm going to kick off the idea of what does it mean to have just some weekly review practices in your life, in your ministry, all those sorts of things. And talk about the first one of those, the Sunday night review, the Monday morning review. It's a preparatory review of what's going on. So I'm excited to have this conversation going on. As always, I'm Chad Brooks. You can find the show notes for this episode at revchadbrooks.com/PPP/047, and there's going to be some stuff in the show notes. I've been trying to make those a little bit thicker lately, a bit more robust. We need better show notes is what I began to think. And so you'll find links over there. You'll also find just some lists, that sort of stuff that you might find to be handy. So let's just jump into this conversation about reviews, about Sunday reviews, and about how they can be dynamically helpful for your ministry. So let's just get on with the conversation. So the first thing, why do reviews? And to be honest, a little bit of this conversation, this is like a 201 level approach to things. If you're struggling with your personal productivity, if you don't really kind of have that stuff figured out just yet, you're starting to realize, Chad, I'm inattentive. I'm not intentional about this. I've got to get my ducks in a row. I've got to get my Raptors back in the cage. What I would encourage you to do is to go over the Becoming Productive course. There's a link to that in the show notes. $50, 11 episodes, 11 videos, 11 workbook projects, like 30-something worksheets, the whole 9 yards. It's a companion to the first season of Productive Pastor, and it's all about you developing your own personal approach to productivity. And so there's an entire module about a week there, and there's an entire module about days, and we'll be talking about those kind of in and out over the next few weeks as we're inside of this series. But that's going to be like the 101 level of intentionality. What we're going to talk about in this episode really is the 201 level of what this looks like. But why do you do reviews? You do reviews to understand where things are. You want to know where you are. You want to know where you are going. If you feel stagnant in ministry, whether it's from a personal approach or an organizational approach, or you might be saying, wow, the whole kind of ministry is a little stagnant right now, the reviews are where you identify it, but really and truly the review is how you're aware of where the ball is moving. There's a couple of questions that you can ask about yourself inside of any review process. But we'll talk about, just some of these over the next few weeks. But really, it's just two things. Boils down to two things. Number one, where am I? So where are you inside of your goals, your core values, your strategic plans, all those sorts of things? Where are you? And the second one is this: where will I go intentionally, or where will I go unintentionally? Shooting from the hip is different. Everybody's shooting from the hip level is different. And what you might find is you're kind of growing as you're aging in ministry. A lot of the folks I coach one-on-one are all kind of where I am. They're in their early 40s. They've got 10, 12, 13 years of this under their belt, and they're starting to ask questions about the long-term reality of what's going on. And they're maybe realizing that where in a previous church or a previous season, even at your same church, who you were at an unintentional level was able to get the job done, but now you've changed or something's changed. I mean, friends, everything has changed the last few years, and you're realizing, okay, I need to begin to become intentional because the things that are happening are no longer cool. Like I want things to be different. And so that's why we do reviews, because reviews are a way for us to just keep focused, keep on track. Reviews are a simple, short way to stay focused, but also to stay adaptive. And you might be already thinking, Chad, I don't have the time for this. I'm going to let you know, I've been doing some version of almost every one of these, at least for the last 3 years. And the episode today, the Sunday review, I've been doing this probably pushing 10 years. and we're talking like 15 minutes here, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes at most. But the value that this brings, the clarity it brings, and it's not so much like always doing better or winning or that sort of performative idea, but it's just the emotional and the mental clarity that can come through this process is the biggest thing. So this episode, we're going to talk about the Sunday night or the Monday morning review, whatever that means. That's a preparatory review. It's kind of pushing into the week, planning that out. Then next episode, we're going to talk about the end of week review, which is probably more of a review in the classical sense. And then the third episode is a newer practice I've only been doing for probably a year and a half, and that's an end-of-day rhythm, an end-of-day routine, that sort of thing. And so we're going to move into what those look like. And so the Sunday night review, Monday morning review, like I said, I keep saying that, but the purpose of this review is to prepare you for the week ahead. And you can choose when to do this, and you can kind of do this whenever you want to do it. I used to do this on Sunday nights. I went through a season where I would do it on Monday mornings at the Waffle House while eating bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit covered in sausage gravy. I did that for a long time. The coronavirus and congestive heart failure kind of knocked that process out of the way. But it's just about preparing for the week ahead. It's a time for you to be realistic. It's time to be realistic about your schedule. It's also a time to be realistic about the season, about what is going on in your life and in ministry right there. I've got an earlier episode. I'll have a link to it in the show notes where I talked about the problem when you plan for 80%. Ministry is a really unique job because ministry has to be adaptive. Ministry has to be responsive, not reactive, but responsive. And so things are going to happen sometimes to us where we're just going to have to like take the plan and calendar, throw it out the window, and be responsive for a moment. And one of the things I've always suggested is this means you need to plan for 80%. Like you need to have a full work day of chaos built into what might happen. And a lot of times I'm coaching with folks, especially around productivity, and we're kind of talking about these weekly schedules. They find out that they've got just way too much going on to not plan. It's like they're planning for 125%. And you don't know that typically until like you look in and you realize there's a problem and you're trying to like get to the bottom of it. And so this preview, let's call it that, the preview of your week really is a way for you to be realistic about your schedule, about the season of life. It's about your way to say, okay, am I leaving enough margin for the job? Because, friends, ministry is a job. And you'll never know this if you don't plan for it. The next thing that happens, like when you're doing this sort of a weekly preview, is you're determining the alignment to your core values into any sort of strategic ministry plan that you have right now. One of my favorite things to do with pastors is to take several months to walk alongside and develop some really, really personal core values. And if you get to your preview and you realize, man, my schedule is just completely throwing me out of my intentions and my plans, I need to maybe think about some work here, think about some change, think about some adjustments I need to make. But it's also, what is your ministry strategic plan? And do you have one? And I think that, you might not be trying to barrel forward and storm the gates of hell or anything like that, but there's a difference between intentional and unintentional. And so, the preview is just a way to make sure that your schedule is aligned to both those core values, those personal values, but also the ministry values that you have that's going on right now. Because, friends, it's very, very easy to make good decisions that keep you from those things that are bringing priorities. And that means that you're willing to trade in your health, your mental condition, your ability, your spiritual condition, all those sorts of things. And so the preview just helps you determine and align those things. And so I'm about to give you 3 reasons, just 3 questions to ask. Like I said, this is a simple thing. This is an easy thing. But 3 questions, but I'm assuming a couple of things when you're doing this, okay? Remember, I told you this is a 201, not a 101. This is what I'm assuming. Number 1, that you already understand time block planning. The weekly module in Being Productive has a couple of worksheets and exercises to take you through the idea of time block planning. I'm already assuming you're doing that. I'm assuming why your Mondays might be different than your Wednesdays, that sort of thing. So that's my first assumption. Remember, prerequisites. You always have prereqs to take a 201 class. So The second assumption or prerequisite is that you have an awareness of your typical rhythm, that you are disciplined in the area of being regular. So you have an idea of what's going on every Monday. You have an idea of what's going on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday. You're not sitting down for this preview and from scratch planning your system every single week. You're keeping up with your calendar. You have some sort of a working and a keeping system. An idea that I talk about a lot in Productive Pastor is you need a working system and you need a keeping system. So those are the prereqs that I'm rolling in here with. And it really is that you've begun establishing a baseline of your personal approach to ministry productivity. Again, if you've not done that yet, I encourage you, go do the Becoming Productive course or sign up for the free 515 email. There's links to both those in the show notes. So 3 questions, and this is the 3-question weekly preview, and that's it. Number 1, what is the most important thing for you to focus on that week? Now, once you understand that, once you determine that, once you see how that aligns perhaps inside of a larger plan or a larger thing, or it just could be that you want to start planning Advent in September, and so you know, hey, this week I need to think through all of my Advent preaching or something like that. And then that when you declare that thing, like what's the most important thing for me to focus on, then that means you're putting in time in your schedule for that. You might have a system of tasks that have to get done in order to focus on it. So you stretch those out across the week. You kind of plan your days accordingly as far as how you answer that question. What's the most important thing for me to focus on? Now, the second question for you to ask is this: what is the most important thing for me to finish this week? Ministry is an interesting job because we don't get to finish things that often. You know, you've heard the phrase, Sunday's always coming. Every Monday, I start working on my sermon for Sunday. The ministry has a finishing problem, but we also have projects and programs and things we're working on. And so you need to declare what's the most important thing for me to finish. I'm going to make sure I have time for this, make sure I have brain space for this, that I've got administrative leadership space for this, all these sorts of things. But this is the most important thing for me to finish this week. You know, if you're never finishing things, you're just kind of staying stagnant. You know, it's a very unintentional way of stuff. And if you struggle finishing things, you might want to think about, why do you always struggle to finish things? And sometimes the way that we might answer that question might tell us a lot about the way that we just have our personal productivity structured. So the second question, what's the most important thing to finish? The third question, the last question, the Sunday preview is this: what is the most important thing for me to start this week? So I'll be honest with y'all. I have had an application to a doctoral program on my desktop for 3 weeks. Okay, now the most important thing for me to finish this week, finish the application process. But the funny thing was, I avoided starting that application process for probably 2 months. And I've thought a lot about why that whole thing is just making me nervous or anxious or whatever. It's like that. But there's something about stating, I'm going to start this week, because when we start things, that means we're willing to become intentional, willing to get a ball rolling, that sort of things. When we declare, I'm going to start something, I'm going to start this week, we take things out of theory land, bring them into action land. They no longer revolve in dream world, but we put them in the real world at that point in time. And so it's the third question: what's the most important thing for me to start? And if you've never done this type of planning, I'll be honest with you, just starting to answer those 3 questions, take 15, 20 minutes, look over your schedule, make a couple adjustments, make some plans, answer those 3 questions, eat your biscuit and gravy. But I think you'll be blown away with what you have clarity, with what you have ability to do moving forward. So 3 questions. What's the most important thing to focus on? 2, what's the most important thing to finish? And 3, what's the most important thing to start this week? That's it. That's a Sunday preview. That's the beginning. That's the 201. Now, I know some of you might want a 301 or a 401, but hey, not yet. 201 is going to have to suffice. So remember to come back next week where we talk about an end-of-week review, what that looks like, when to do that, why I do that, because that one's a little different. That one's not so much work-focused, but that's Sabbath-focused. It's like, what does it take to move you into Sabbath and to think about those sorts of things. So that's what's coming up next week. Now, remember, go to the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/047, where you can find links to the things we've talked about. Also, just a little bit more work, a little bit more thoughts and ideas behind some of this stuff. If you're not part of the Productive Pastor community on Facebook yet, you need to come hang out at the Productivity Party. It's a great place. Over 1,000 pastors are in there who are on this journey of ministry and productivity together. So invite you into that. And then the last thing, I brought it up a bunch, but I believe in it, put a lot of time into it, and it is a tremendous value for the price. But is that Becoming Productive course? It started off as a 90-page PDF, adapted that earlier this year to pull into an 11-module course. You can get a link to that in the show notes. If you're struggling with the 101, or if you're struggling with like the schooling you get before you get to the 101, that's the best place I know of to start off, is that Becoming Productive course. So, Chad Brooks, it's always a pleasure and an honor to steward this community, Productive Pastor, and I will be back in the next episode to talk about an end of week review.